The 1980s should have been British motoring's great comeback story. After years of industrial strikes, declining build quality, and rapidly growing foreign competition, the industry was under enormous pressure to finally deliver. Manufacturers promised innovation, reliability, and genuine value. Buyers believed them. And in many cases, that trust was completely misplaced. Some of the decade's most confidently launched cars became its biggest embarrassments. Today, we're counting down 10 of the worst British cars of the 1980s, and number 1. It still catches people completely off guard. Even those who lived through that era rarely see it coming. Let's start with number 10. Number 10. Talbot Horizon. Number 10 on our list is the Talbot Horizon, a car that most people have almost entirely forgotten about, which is fitting, because it never really gave them a strong reason to remember it. Launched in Britain in 1978 and sold through much of the 1980s, the Horizon was positioned as a practical family hatchback capable of competing with the emerging wave of European rivals. On paper, it sounded reasonable. In reality, it was a lesson in mediocrity. The build quality was inconsistent, the interior felt flimsy even by the standards of the time, and the driving experience was uninspiring to the point of being forgettable. Chrysler had handed over the brand to Peugeot by this point, and Talbot felt like a brand already on its way out. Buyers sensed it. Sales were weak. And within a few years, Talbot itself would disappear entirely. But this is just the beginning. Number 9. Austin Ambassador. Moving to number 9, we arrive at the Austin Ambassador, a car you almost never hear mentioned today, and there's a very specific reason for that. Introduced in 1982 as a direct replacement for the Princess, the Ambassador was British Leyland's attempt to hold firmly onto the upper end of the family saloon market. But here's where things start to fall apart. The car was based on aging underpinnings, offered nothing genuinely new, and arrived with a level of finish that frankly embarrassed the engineers who designed it. The Ambassador was supposed to signal progression. Instead, it felt like a retreat. Interior panels that didn't align properly, electrical gremlins that appeared almost immediately, and a ride quality that failed to justify its asking price. Buyers who chose one quickly understood the mistake. Production lasted just 2 years. By early 1984, it was gone, erased quietly, as if it never existed. Number 8. Triumph Acclaim. The Triumph Acclaim, launched in 1981, was in many ways the quiet end of a celebrated British icon. Based almost entirely on the Honda Ballade, the Acclaim was the product of a licensing deal between British Leyland and Honda, and while it was, in truth, a reasonably competent car, it raised a deeply uncomfortable question. Where was the British engineering? Where was the Triumph spirit? And this is what most people don't realize, the Acclaim wasn't a bad car in the conventional sense. It started reliably. It held together. But it felt like a concession, an admission that BL could no longer design competitive cars independently. The badge said Triumph. The engineering said Honda. Loyal buyers who expected something genuinely British got something very different, without being clearly told. Trust in the name eroded quietly. By 1984, Triumph as a brand was finished. The name never ever truly came back. Number 7. MG Metro. The MG Metro arrived in 1982 wearing one of Britain's most beloved badges, and that's precisely where the disappointment begins. The standard Metro was a reasonable small car for its era, practical, compact, and reasonably priced. But MG buyers expected something more than practicality. They expected performance, character, and the spirit that had made the MG name famous for decades. On paper, the MG Metro delivered modest power gains and a sportier interior. In practice, it felt like a costume rather than a transformation. The driving experience was underwhelming, the handling uninspired, and the performance figures weren't enough to justify the premium. This is what most people don't realize, the MG badge was being used to sell cars, not to inspire drivers. Existing fans felt the deep letdown acutely. The name had deserved better. And as we move higher on this list, the stories only get considerably harder to defend. Number 6. Reliant Robin. The Reliant Robin occupies a strange place in British automotive history, simultaneously iconic and genuinely problematic. Produced throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the three-wheeled Robin was technically classified as a motorcycle and could be driven on a motorcycle license, making it accessible to those unable to afford a full car. But here's where things get uncomfortable. The car's fundamental design, a single front wheel combined with a lightweight fiberglass body, created serious stability issues, particularly during cornering at speed. Tipping was not a mythologized exaggeration. It was a documented, real-world concern that owners genuinely navigated on a daily basis. The Robin wasn't supposed to be a comedy prop. For many working-class British buyers, it was practical, affordable transport. But the execution fell short of even those modest expectations. The concept was reasonable. The physics disagreed. Would you have honestly taken that risk? Because many people did, and quietly regretted it. Number 5. Austin Maestro. Number 5 is where the list starts to become genuinely difficult to believe. The Austin Maestro, launched in 1983, was British Leyland's flagship attempt at a modern family hatchback, and by the standards of the time, it arrived with genuine ambition. But here's where it all starts to unravel in spectacular fashion. The Maestro was given a talking dashboard, a synthesized voice that would alert drivers to faults, remind them of fuel levels, and generally aimed to project a sense of technological sophistication. In practice, it became a national joke almost immediately. The electronics were unreliable, the voice system frequently malfunctioned, and the car itself suffered from poor build quality that made the innovative features feel completely beside the point. Buyers expected a serious family car. They got something that felt half-finished. The idea was genuinely ambitious. The execution wasn't. Only owners know how quickly the problems began stacking up. Number 4. Austin Montego. The Austin Montego launched in 1984, and on paper it represented everything British Leyland needed it to be, a modern, practical family saloon that could compete seriously in a crowded market. The advertising was confident, the pitch was convincing. And this is where the trust started to break. Early Montego suffered from alarming levels of unreliability that drove owners to despair within the first few months of ownership. Electrical faults were widespread and persistent. Rust appeared at a troubling pace. Dealers were overwhelmed with warranty claims. The car felt unfinished in a fundamental way, not just cosmetically, but mechanically. People who had bought into the promise of a competent British family car found themselves stranded, frustrated, and deeply reluctant to return to the brand. Montego owners became some of the most vocal critics of the British car industry. And once that reputation took hold, it proved almost impossible to shake. Number 3. Morris Ital. The Morris Ital is one of those cars that genuinely makes you question how it was approved for production. Launched in 1980 as a supposed update to the aging Marina, the Ital was, in honesty, barely a new car at all. The basic structure was essentially unchanged from a model that dated back to the early 1970s, dressed up with minor cosmetic revisions and presented as a modern offering. But here's the uncomfortable truth: buyers who looked carefully could see through it almost immediately. The underpinnings were outdated, the handling was poor by contemporary standards, and the build quality did nothing to reassure a market that was already losing faith in British Leyland's output. The name itself suggested Italian styling input, which raised expectations that the final product utterly failed to meet. The Ital felt dishonest. Buyers expected progress. What they received was an outdated design with fresh trim applied. Number 2. Rover 800. The Rover 800, launched in 1986, was supposed to be the car that proved Britain could still compete at the premium end of the market. Developed in partnership with Honda, it arrived with genuine fanfare, Rover's flagship, the car that would take on the Germans and win back the confidence of discerning buyers. But here's where things become deeply uncomfortable. The early Rover 800 was plagued by reliability issues that completely undermined its premium positioning. Electrical systems failed regularly. Build quality was inconsistent. Interior trim that looked impressive in the showroom began to degrade faster than buyers anticipated. And in the United States, where Rover launched the car as the Sterling, the reputation collapsed almost entirely within just a few years. Dealers couldn't sustain it. Owners walked away. For a car that was supposed to be Rover's finest hour, the reality was something entirely different, and the industry noticed immediately. Number 1. Rover SD1. And now, the car that still surprises people when it appears on lists like this. The Rover SD1 won the European Car of the Year award in 1977. Read that again. It was celebrated across the continent as the finest new car of its year, elegant, fast, and genuinely progressive. So why is it here at number 1? Because by the early 1980s, the SD1 had become arguably the most catastrophic example of the gap between potential and delivery in British automotive history. The build quality was so consistently poor that it became an industry reference point for failure. Rust, electrical faults, and mechanical unreliability arrived before many cars even reached their second year. The body was beautiful. The ownership experience was frequently humiliating. A Car of the Year winner that became a byword for British manufacturing failure. That stark contrast is exactly why number 1 still surprises many people. The 1980s were a defining decade for British motoring, not always in the right ways. Time and again, manufacturers launched cars that carried genuine promise, only to let their buyers down in ways that were both predictable and avoidable. The gap between expectation and reality defined this era more than any single model. If this list resonated with you, or if you remember owning one of these cars, we'd love to hear in the comments below. Which car surprised you most? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Britain Rewind, because there's plenty more automotive history to uncover.